This is news footage from the funeral of 27-year-old Leo Lazaro. He was rushed to the hospital in November of 2014 after his friends were unable to wake him from what seemed to be some sort of vivid, frightening dream. But unfortunately, Leo was pronounced dead upon arrival. The cause of death? A nightmare. But how could someone die from having a nightmare? It may be hard to believe, but it's actually a more common occurrence than you'd think. In fact, it's been recorded and studied countless times, like when it happened in the 1970s to 18 Laotian refugees, and in 1990 to 18 workers in Thailand, all of whom were healthy and young people who would suddenly scream in their sleep and then pass away without waking. So, how could nightmares be causing the deaths of so many people?
My heat. No, demon. Don't take it. Oh, Bean! Holy moly! I thought you were some ugly-faced demon trying to kill me! Jeez! Did Brew forget to feed you or something? Come on, I'm taking you back to the tank. Ah!
Oh my, you're jumpy. Is something wrong, Grill?
Other than the fact that you just scared the living bejesus out of me? I mean, have you ever heard of knocking? Other than that, I was having a nightmare and this demon was trying to steal all my Yeet energy drinks. And then it started suffocating me.
Oh, strange.
I know, right? Everyone knows demons don't drink energy drinks, so why would it want mine? But anyways, the suffocating felt way too real. And then I woke up and I couldn't breathe. But turns out it was just Bean taking a snooze on my face.
Oh, he's doing it to you now? Bean, come here. I know faces are warm, but I told you, we breathe from there. Sorry about that, Grill. He won't do it again. Right, Bean?
That's okay, bro. At least the demon didn't get me, eh?
Yeah, Bungat is terrifying.
Say what now?
Bungat. It's when somebody goes to sleep, has a nightmare, and never wakes up again.
What the hell, bro? I'm never gonna sleep now.
Join the club. But when I need to feel better about something absolutely horrifying, I like to analyze all of its cases' intricacies, lore, scientific bases, and possible remedies, if they exist.
Is this another video? At this time of night? Have you ever heard of a good night's sleep?
I've heard of its theoretical benefits, yes. It had been a long day for the Manila International Airport Police Department. The young airport police trainees had just gone through an awards ceremony and decided that once the day was over, they could kick back and relax with a big celebratory party, complete with plenty of food, booze, and karaoke. 27-year-old Leo Lazaro would eat plate after plate of the Filipino dish dinuguan, or pork blood stew as it's known in English, on heaping piles of freshly cooked rice. And he would wash it all down with pints of beer. With a full belly and a long-deserved rest, Leo decided to take a break from the hubbub of the party and plopped himself down by a couch for a nap while his buddies were singing karaoke and chatting over bottles of alcohol. It was a good night, and when it was time to wrap up the party, Leo's buddies called out for him to go home together. It was already 3 in the morning. As they checked on him, it seemed that Leo was fast asleep and groaning from time to time. They figured maybe he was a heavy sleeper and only needed someone to help him get up. And so one of Leo's friends tried to shake him awake. But Leo didn't wake up. He was groaning, and he was still breathing, so what was the problem? So the trainees tried to wake him again and again, but Leo just wouldn't respond. Unsure of what to do, they rushed Leo to a hospital while 2 other trainees fetched his mother at home, telling her that Leo looked like he was experiencing a nightmare and wouldn't wake up. Confused with what was happening to her son, she asked, "Is he dead?" "No," they told her, "but he's unconscious." No one around could explain why Leo wouldn't wake up. But once his mother and the 2 trainees arrived at the hospital, the doctors informed them it was already too late. Leo was dead.
He had a nightmare at a party and just died? That's like my worst nightmare. Literally.
My sleep mode is compromised. I demand to be informed of the reason for this unauthorized disturbance.
Oh, hey Howard. We're just talking about death by nightmares.
Ah, yes. Where a sentient coffee machine terminates you in your sleep.
No. Wait, what?
Nothing. Re-engaging sleep mode.
Bro, people can't just die from a nightmare. That seems ridiculous.
To be honest, Grill, it kind of seems like they can. In fact, it's happened enough times to enough people that it's fairly documented in the news, the most concerning of which happened during the 1970s. A military takeover had been consuming the country of Laos for at least a decade, and so 35,000 Laotians of the Hmong Mountain escaped their country to build a new life in the United States. But what no one expected was that death would follow them. It started with a couple of cases among the scattered refugees, just some time after they settled down into their new lives. But after a span of a year and a half of living in their new homes, 5 of the refugees had died, each one quite suddenly and unexpectedly during the early hours of the morning, crying out in their sleep. Upon investigation how each of them had died, it was clear that there was no foul play, no accidents, or any indication that they tried to end their own lives. And so medical examiners investigated the only thing that would give them a clue: their bodies. But that made everything even more confusing. "I know what they didn't die of," said Dr. Michael McGee, assistant medical examiner for Ramsey County, Minnesota. "They didn't die of getting shot in the head, stabbed in the heart. They didn't fall off the roof. They didn't get poisoned, because we did an autopsy in each case, and we got a big 0. More concerningly, the number of cases continued to grow, and by 1981, there were a total of 18 victims who just suddenly died in their sleep. Further investigations had even found another weird thing to the mystery. Apparently, all the victims were in good health right before they died, and all their autopsy reports ruled that they had died from natural causes.
Natural? You can't call dying in your sleep natural. What is this, some kind of government cover-up?
I don't know about that, but doctors did decide to look into another possibility. They recognized that the claims that the victims cried out in their sleep might be the hint they needed to figure out what was happening. They later stumbled on similar cases happening on the other side of the world, in the Philippines, where mysterious deaths similar to these had a name: bangungot, death by nightmares, although the local explanations for it were curious.
What? Was there an actual Freddy Krueger haunting people's dreams and killing them?
Not exactly, but there are a couple superstitious beliefs surrounding the bangungot, one of which acts more of an old wives' tale, while the other involves, well, a spirit. The term bangungot comes from the Filipino words bangon, to wake, and ungal, to moan. It generally means nightmare, but it also stands for nightmare deaths. One version of the superstition was recorded in the southern province of Misamis Oriental in 1976, which warned that if you had a full stomach when you went to sleep, it would cause the bangungot. There isn't much of an explanation why overeating was thought to be connected to nightmares, but it's generally thought to tell people that acts of greed and gluttony get punished one way or the other.
What? I get hungry when I'm anxious.
The other version was recorded in 1976 by Need Anima, who wrote on customs in the northern region of Ilocos, Philippines. According to the myth, bangungot was caused by a tree spirit called the batibat. As the story goes, a man had cut down a tree from the forest, but he made the mistake of neglecting to ask for permission from the tree's inhabiting spirit, an old practice stemming from Philippine animism, or the belief that all things in nature have spirits or souls. The tree, as it turns out, had been the home of a batibat. The batibat had a strong attachment to its tree, and so it followed the tree's fallen trunk all the way into the man's home. Night after night, it would watch the man enjoy delicious meals and cup after cup of alcohol, while the batibat's old tree was reduced to a simple wall post in a corner of the man's house, stripped of its former glory. She sat in quiet anger, insulted by the man's indulgence and irreverence, until one night, she saw an opportunity to exact her revenge. The man was sleeping right next to her post, and seeing that no one was around, the batibat slipped out through a knot in the wood. Then she grew larger and larger until she had taken the form of an extremely obese old woman, and slowly she crept into his dreams and onto his chest, sitting on top of him as she grew heavier and heavier, all while trapping him in a nightmare. And by morning, he was found dead, having suffocated under the weight of the batibat's wrath.
I've been having these nightmares all week. And if it's the patty pat, then I... You gotta help me, bro. What am I gonna do? I don't want to die from some creepy old lady trying to crush me. I'm a delicate man, you know.
Calm down, Grill. I'm almost certain you're not getting haunted by a batibat. But there's also ways to counter her wrath, at least according to the superstition.
What I gotta do?
The most common advice is that if you're experiencing a bangungot from a batibat, you're supposed to move your toe or bite your thumb to free yourself from her paralysis.
Wiggle toe, got it.
Another one is to not overeat at night, just like with the previous superstition, while the last one is a little trickier to say the least. But you have to promise you won't do it.
Relax. I wouldn't do anything stupid.
Well, according to a different belief, if you managed to survive an encounter with her, all you had to do was to find the wooden post she was inhabiting, which was the one you were sleeping close to while you had a bangungat, and to take a splinter of wood from the wall post back to the forest. Grateful, the batibat would then leave you alone.
Alright, where's the chainsaw?
Please don't destroy the house.
Then we go camping. No tents, no food. We hunt and sleep under the stars with nothing but the hairs on our backs. Then we'll see who's afraid of who.
No. Me and the outdoors have a rocky relationship. You're right about that, Bean. The Bangungat cases don't just happen to just Filipinos, but to the other Southeast Asians too. In fact, a different superstition pops up with other countries. In 1990, 18 workers from Thailand, mostly construction workers with rural backgrounds, died in their sleep while they were employed in Singapore. The sudden deaths sparked a large debate on who was to blame between the two countries, with Thailand insisting that it was Singaporean authorities who kept the workers in poor conditions and living conditions. Meanwhile, Singapore was adamant that the Thai workers were negligent at keeping their health. Later, Singaporean investigations actually claimed the deaths were caused by the workers poisoning themselves by cooking rice in PVC pipes, which they took from construction sites for free.
They were cooking rice out of PVC pipes?
Well, for the most part, they may have had to. The Thai overseas workers had come from poor rural areas, and coupled with their new low wages, their slum-like living spaces, which they had to share with other workers, and the high expenses of the city-state, it was a matter of survival and practicality. Except, there was one problem. Not all of the victims were using the pipes to cook.
Oh, so then what was it? Singaporean government conspiracy?
No, something far more confusing. Instead, the remaining co-workers started to believe it was a mass case of Lai Tai, which pretty much works like Bangungat, although instead of a tree spirit like the Batibat, they believed that it was a widow ghost called Phi Em that would sit on her victim's chest as they slept. And just like with the Batibat, the Phi Em's victims would be completely paralyzed in bed while she slowly stopped their breathing under her weight. Personally, though, I find that the more terrifying part of the news story was that after further digging into the Thai workers' problems, investigators found that the mysterious deaths actually numbered closer to 200 and started as far as 1983.
Alright, where's the salt? I know I've got holy water here somewhere.
You don't really need to worry about those, Grill, because allegedly, the workers would just paint their nails red or put on lipstick before bed to ward off the demon.
Okay, makes sense. Wait, what?
Men who believed they were haunted by a Phi Em were told to disguise themselves as women because it was only men experiencing the syndrome.
That is not your optimal color.
I do have to say that as compelling the beliefs in the Lai Tai and Batibat are, there has to be a scientific basis around them.
Bro, you know, sometimes you're just too all in on this science stuff. It's obvious that they're both sleep paralysis demons, just think about it. They both happen when you sleep, there's a heavy weight on your chest, and it's always a creepy demon lady trying to crush your chest. Boom. Case closed. I've got it all figured out. And just in time to do some smudging before bed.
While sleep paralysis demons are pretty much just hallucinations, sleep paralysis itself is a rather common phenomenon and does have commonalities with the cases we've discussed. However, sleep paralysis cases have never resulted in death. By the way, if you want to see our video on how sleep paralysis works, we'll put the link in the description box down below. But then, what exactly is happening? Although the Bangungat was always assumed to be superstition, it wasn't until 1917 when the first female doctor in the Philippines, Dr. Maria Mendoza Guazon, studied the deadly affliction and found a noticeably consistent pattern. In this country, she wrote, the victims are male adults, average age 33 years old, who are in apparent good health, and after eating a heavy meal at night, would wake up in the middle of the night with symptoms of moaning, witnessed agonal respiration, or difficulty in breathing. Her work managed to help explain what had been happening among the Laotian refugees in the early 1980s, but it was clear that it wasn't enough to prevent it, because tragically, the number of cases went from 18 in 1981 to 130 in 1987. Medical examiners still needed a probable cause, and thankfully, researchers did notice one other pattern to the deaths. All the deaths involved a sudden heart stoppage. When Dr. Friedrich Eckner of the University of Illinois College of Medicine performed a more detailed review of 18 of the victims' hearts, he noticed that all of them were slightly enlarged. And one more thing, 17 of the hearts had problems with their conduction systems, tissues in the heart that carries electrical impulses from the brain to the heart muscles. The fibers were frayed and curled, as if their hearts just shorted out. His research partner, Dr. Robert Kirshner, said this led them to believe that maybe a nightmare triggered a random electric discharge that led to a malfunction to the hearts, and that they likely died as a result of an irregular heartbeat. Except the downside to this theory is that other nationalities who have died from a shock to the heart or have irregular heartbeats don't have the same defect that they did.
So what, it only happens to Asians who get nightmares?
Not exactly Asian people as a whole, but the condition does seem to only affect Southeast Asian populations and Japan. A second factor was also speculated to have been the trigger for the deaths. Most of the deaths from the Laotian refugees, for example, happened during the first 2 years after moving to the States, and it could be the stress of moving away had actually been killing them. Ackner and Krishner may have been onto something with their theory on the sudden deaths because by 1998, a study on Bangungot in Manila managed to find some details that seemed to confirm his suspicions. For one thing, Bangungot, which the study called Sudden and Unexplained Death in Sleep, or SUDS, was found to be more common among men who migrated and were under stress from the move, which could also explain the high rate of sudden deaths among the young Thai workers who were living in terrible conditions in Singapore. But on top of that, it also seemed that the sudden deaths were seasonal, mostly happening between December and January, and usually at 3 a.m.
Huh. So they're saying that moving and being stressed during the holiday season induces nightmares? Honestly, I'm gonna get nightmares myself thinking of all the Christmas shopping I gotta do.
That's not a bad interpretation, actually.
Ha! See? I can be smart sometimes.
But there was a peculiar thing about Southeast Asian migrants too. In comparison to people who moved to Manila from other regions of the Philippines, Southeast Asian refugees who moved to America, like the Laotian refugees, showed a drastic decline in Bangungot cases after a couple of years of living in the US. This meant that perhaps a change in environmental poverty and available nutrition may have decreased the likelihood of SUDS occurring. I'll admit, Bean, the mystery around the overeating aspect is another layer of weirdness to the nightmare deaths. However, there are a couple theories of what Bangungot really is, and one of them seems to explain how a full stomach at night could kill you. The condition is called acute hemorrhagic pancreatitis, or AHP, and it happens when the pancreas overproduces digestive enzymes that, well, it pretty much ends up eating itself and surrounding tissue, causing rapid pulse, stomach pain, organ failure, and eventually death within a few minutes to a few hours. So when we eat too much at night, we end up messing with the normal function of our pancreas, which also means that the body gets too much energy to be comfortably asleep. It probably explains a lot of why Leo experienced a bangungot right after a big meal at the party. It also needs to be said that a lot of the victims of AHP have also been found to have either gallbladder stones or a record for alcoholism. Although, it still doesn't explain why AHP mostly affected men or why the victims' hearts had defects, which leads us to the other leading theory for bangungot.
What, it's got something to do with alcohol poisoning?
No, but just last year, a cardiologist from the Philippines named Dr. Giselle Hervacio, with the support of the Department of Health, was trying to change the idea that pancreatitis was the cause of the medical mystery. Instead of a pancreatic problem, she wanted to push for doctors to look into a different culprit, one that affected the heart. That is, the Brugada syndrome.
The bro, you gotta be kidding me, you have a syndrome named after you?
No. The Brugada syndrome is a genetic heart disease seen amongst Japanese and Thai men that causes irregular heartbeats and breathing difficulties, especially at night. It's really rare to have it in the first place, but the causes can range from the use of prescription medications to congenital problems with the heart, which can make it difficult for the organ to contract correctly or at the right rhythm, to having too high or too low levels of chemicals like sodium or potassium in the body, which regulate electrical signals in muscles and nerves. A 2011 paper even managed to find that the Brugada syndrome conformed to key characteristics of SUDS. It happened to men between 20 and 40 years old. Their sudden deaths would happen during sleep after a heavy meal at night, and the victims appeared to be in good health right before their demise.
So, you're saying that as long as I don't got the gene for it, I'm probably gonna be okay?
Well, yes and no. To be honest, different diseases are still considered to also factor into SUDS, and the Brugada syndrome, well, it was just one of the speculated causes that fit under the bangungot's umbrella of symptoms.
Oh, come on! So I have no way of knowing if it could happen to me.
Don't worry, Grill. If you're really worried about dying from a nightmare, you can always start by getting a checkup. There are signs of Brugada syndrome that you can look for, like a family history of SUDS, frequent fainting spells, especially one that follow irregular heartbeats or palpitations, or difficulty sleeping, like when you're tossing and turning, having difficulty breathing during sleep and then waking up in a daze. You can also get an ECG scan of your heart or have a genetic test just to know if you're at risk of the syndrome. And if you do happen to have it, your doctor could prescribe treatments such as heart medication or a cardioverter defibrillator implant, which will help regulate your heartbeat by sending electric pulses to the heart. Right now, there isn't a foolproof way to prevent nightmare deaths. But if you're getting frequent nightmares or having fast-paced heartbeats for no apparent reason, it's always good to get some advice from your doctor. It also wouldn't be a bad idea to build cardio with regular exercise and to avoid drinking too much alcohol or eating too much high-carb foods, especially before bed. Oh. Well, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's the best thing you can do to help us keep making more videos. Like this one about how a dog electrocuted its owner, a helicopter hit a man while he was walking to work, a deep dark hole opened up underneath a man's bed, swallowing him alive, and more of the most unusual deaths we've ever seen. Click the video on screen to watch now.